Introduction. The man who threw his way into the partnership with Thomas Alva Edison. Truly, truths are the things and powerful things at that when they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire for their translation into riches or other material object. A little more than 30 years ago, Edwin C. Barnes discovered how true it is that men really do think and grow rich. His discovery did not come about one sitting. It came little by little, beginning with a burning desire to become a business associate of a great Edison. One of the chief characteristics of Barnes' desire was that it was definite. He wanted to work with Edison, not for him. Observe carefully the description of how he went about translating his desire into reality, and you will have a better understanding of the 13 principles which leads to riches. When the desire or impulse of thought first flashed into in his mind, he was no in position to act upon it. Two difficulties stood in his way. He did not know Mr. Edison, and he did not have enough money to pay the railroad fare to Orange, New Jersey. These difficulties were sufficient to have discouraged the majority of men from making any attempt to carry out the desire. But his way was no ordinary desire. He was so determined to find a way to carry out his desire that he finally decided to travel by blind barrage rather than he defeated. To be undefeated his wins that he went to the East Orange on a foreign train. He presented himself at Mr. Edison's laboratory and announced he had come to go into a business with his investor. In speaking of the first meeting between the Barons and Edison, years later, Mr. Edison said, "He stood there before me, looking like an ordinary tramp, but there was something in the expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he had come after. I had learned from the year of experience with the men that when a man really desires a thing so deeply that he is willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he is sure to win. I gave him the opportunity he asked for because I saw he had made up his mind to stand by until he succeeded. Subsequent event proved that no mistake was made. Just what young Baron said to Mr. Edison on that occasion was far less important than which he thought. Edison himself said so. It could not have been the young man's appreciation which got him his start in Edison office, for that was definitely against him. It was what he thought that counted. It is the significance of this statement could be conveyed to every person who read it. There would be no need of the reminder of this book. Barron did not get his partnership with Edison on his first interview. He did get a chance to work on an Edison office at a very nominal wage. Doing work was an unimportant to Edison, but most important to Barron because it gave an opportunity to display his merchandise where his intended partner could see it. Months went by. Apparently, nothing happened to bring the converted goal which Barnes had set up in his mind as his definite major purpose, but something important was happening in Barnes' mind. He was constantly intensifying his desire to become the business associate of Edison. Psychologists have correctly said that when one is truly ready for the things it put into an appearance, Barron was ready for the business association with the Edison. Moreover, he was determined to remain ready until he got which he was seeking. He did not say himself, "Ah, well, what's the use? I guess I will change my mind and try for the salesman job." But he did say, "I came go here to go into a business with Edison, and I will really accomplish with his end, and if it take the remainder of my life." He meant it. What a different story men would have to tell if only they would adopt a definite purpose and stand by the purpose until he had time to become an all consuming obsession. Maybe young Baron did not know it at the time, but he was bulldog determined. His persistence in the standing back of a single desire was destined to mow down all the opposition and bring him the opportunity he was seeking. When the opportunity came, it appeared in a different form a different direction that Barons has accepted. That one of the trick of the opportunity he has sly habit of slipping in by the back door and often come disguised in the form of misfortune or a temporary defeat. Perhaps this was why so many fail to recognize opportunity. Mr. Edison had just preferred a new office device known at that time. At the Edison dedicated machine now called Epiphone, his salesmen were not enthusiastic over the machine, did not believe it could sold without a great effort. Baron Son saw his opportunity. He had Crowley in quietly, hidden in queer looking machine which interested no one but Baron and the investor. Baron knew he could sell the Edison dictating machine. He suggested this to Edison and promptly got his chance. He did sell the machine. In the fact, he sold it so successfully that Edison gave him the contract to distribute and market it all over the nation. Out of that business association grew the slogan made by the Edison and installed by the Baron. The business alliance has been in operation for more than 30 years. Out of it, Baron has made himself rich in money, but he has done something indefinitely greater. He has proved that one really man thinks and grow rich. How much actually cash the original desire of Barons has worth to him, I have no way of knowing. Perhaps it has been brought him two or more $3 million. But the amount, whatever it is, become insignificant when compared with a greater asset he acquired in the form of definite knowledge that is intangible. Purpose, impulse of thought can be transmuted into the physical counterpart by the application of known principle. Barnes literally thought himself into a partnership with the great Edison. He thought himself into a fortune. He had nothing to start with except the capacity to know that what he wanted and a determination to stand by the desire until he realized it. He had no money to begin with. He had but little education. He had no influence, but he did all the initiative, faith, and the will to win. With the intangible force, he made himself number one man with the greatest investor who ever lived. Now, let us look at a different situation and study a man who had plenty of tangible evidences of riches but lost it because he stopped 3 feet short of the goal he was seeking. 3 feet from gold. One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaking the temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of his mistake at one time and another. An uncle of R.U. Darby was caught by the gold fever in the gold rush days and went west to dig and grow rich. He was never heard that more gold had been mined from the brains of the men had ever taken from the earth. He stand a calm and went to work with pick up the shovel. The going was hard, but his lust for the gold was definite. After a week of labor, he was rewarded by the discovery of shining ore. He needed machinery to bring the ore to the surface. Quietly, he covered up the mine, retraced his footsteps to the home of Williamsburg, Maryland, told his relative and few neighbors of the strike. They got together money for the needed machinery, and he slept. The uncle and Darby went back to work the mine. The first car of ore was mined and shipped to the smelter. The return proved they had one of the richest mines in the Colorado. A few more cars that one could clear the depth. Then would come the bill kinging in profit. Down went the drill. Up went the hopes of the Darby and the uncle. Something happened. The veins of gold ore disappeared. They had come to end of the rainbow and plot of gold was no longer there. They have drilled on, desperately trying to pick up and the veins again and no allowed. They were drilled on, desperately trying to pick up the veins again and no available. Finally decided to quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few $100 and took a train back home. Some junk men are dumb, but not this one. He called a miner engineer to look up the mine. To do a little calculating, the engineer advised that a project has failed because the owner did not familiar with the fault lines. His calculations showed that the veins would be just found 3 feet from there where Darby had stopped drilling. This was exactly where it was found. The junk man took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Most of the money which went into machinery was seduced through the effort of R.U. Darby, who was then a very young man. The money came from the relative and neighbor because of the faith in him. He paid back every dollar of it, although he was eager in doing so. Long afterward, Mr. Darby recoupled his loss many times over when he made the discovery the desire that can transmuted into gold. The discovery came after he went into the business of selling life insurance. Remembering that he lost a huge fortune because he stopped there 3 feet gold. Darby profited by the experience in his chosen work by the simple method by saying to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because the men say no when I ask them to buy insurance. Darby is one of the small company of fewer than 50 men who sells more than $1 million in a life insurance annually. He owes a stickability to the lesson he learned from the quotability in gold mining business. Before success comes in any man's life, he is sure to meet with much temporary defeat and perhaps some failure. When defeat overtakes a man, and the easier and the most logical thing is to do is quit. That is exactly what the majority of men do. More than 500 of the most successful men in the country had ever known told the author that their greatest success came just one step beyond the profit at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is just a trickster, which a keen sense of irony and cunning. It takes a great delight in tripping ones when success is almost within the reach. A 50-cent lesson in persistence. Shortly, Mr. Darby received a degree from the University of Hard Knocks and he decided to profit his experience in the gold mining business. He had the good fortune to present on an occasion that proved to him no does not necessarily means no. One afternoon, he went helping the business grind when an old-fashioned mill. The uncle operated a large farm on which a number of cold Scarecrow farmers lived. Quietly the door was opened and a small goat child, the daughter of tenant, walked in and took her place near the door. The uncle looked up, saw the child and barked her roughly, what to do what? Murkily the child replied, my mommy sent me 50 cents. I will not do it. The uncle restored. Now you run on home. Ash, the child replied, but she did not move. The uncle went ahead and with his work so busily engaged that he did not pay enough attention to the child to observe that she did not leave. When he looked up and saw her little standing there, he yelled at her, I told you to go home. Now go. I will take a switch to you. The little girl said, but she did not budge an inch. The uncle dropped a stack of grain he was about to pour into the mill hopper, picked up the barrel safe and started toward the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness a murder. He knew his uncle with a fierce temper. He knew that the colored children were not supposed to defy with white people in the part of country. When the uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she quietly stepped forward one step, looked up into the eyes, and screamed at the top of her shrill voice, "My mummy's got have that 50 cent." The uncle stopped at her for a minute and slowly laid the barrel safe on his floor, but his hand in his pocket took out a half a dollar and gave it to her. The child took the money and slowly backed toward the door, and never taking his eyes off to the man who she had just conquered. After she has gone, the uncle sat down the box and looked out the window into space, and more than a 10 minutes he was pondering with the awe over the whipping he had just taken. Mr. Darby too was doing something. And it was the first time in his all experience that he had seen a colored child deliberately master an adult white person. How did she do it? What happened to the uncle that called him lost his fearlessness and become a docile to as a lamb? What strange power did the child use that made her master over the superior? These and other similar questions flashed into Darby's mind, but he did not find an answer until the year later he told me the story. Strangely, the story of the unusual experience was told to the author in the old mill on a very spot where the uncle took his whipping. Strangely took I have devoted nearly a quarter of century to study the power of enable an ignorant, illiterate colored child to conquer an intelligent man. As we stood there is a musty old mill. Mr. Darby repeated the story of unusual conquest and finished by asking, "What can you make it? What strange power did your child use that complete whipped my uncle?" The answer to the question will found in the principle described in this book. The answer is full and complete. It contains detail and instructions sufficient to enable anyone to understand, apply the same force which the little child accidentally stepped upon. Keep your mind alert, and you will observe exactly what a strange power came to rescue the child. You will catch a glimpse of his power in the next chapter. Somewhere in the book, you will find an idea that will quicken your receptive power and place on your command for your own benefit. This same irresistible power, the awareness of this power may come to you in the first chapter, or it may flash into your mind in some subsequent chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea, or it may come in the nature of a plan or a purpose. Again, it may cause you to go back into your past experiences of failure or defeat and bring the surface some lesson by which you can regain all you lost through defeat. After I described Mr. Darby the power of unwittingly used by the little colored child, he quickly retraced his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman and frankly acknowledged that success in that field was due and no small degree of the lesson he had learned from the child. Mr. Darby pointed out, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw the child standing there in the old mill, and his eyes were glaring in the defenses that I said to myself, I gotta make this sale. The better portion of all sale I have made were made by the people had said no. He recalls too his mistake in having stopped only 3 feet from the gold, but he had said the experience of blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on, no matter how hard the going may be, a lesson I needed to learn before I could succeed in anything. This story of Mr. Darby and his uncle, the colored child, and the gold mine doubtlessly will read by hundreds of men who had their living by the selling life insurances, and to all of these the author wishes to offer the suggestion that Darby owes to his two experiences his ability to sell more than $1 million of life insurance every year. Life is strange and often it is imponderable. Both the success and the failure have their root in the simple experiences. Mr. Darby's experiences were commonplace with a simple enough, yet they held the answer to his destiny in this life. Therefore, they were important to him as a life itself. He profited by these two dramatic experiences because he analyzed them and found the lesson they taught. But what of the man who has neither the time nor the inclination to study the failure in the search of knowledge they may lead to success. Where and how he is to learn the art of converting the defeat into a stepping stone to opportunity. In answer to this question, this book has written the answer for a description of 13 principles, but remember as you read the answer you by seeking to the question which have caused you ponder your strangeness of life may found in your own mind through some idea, plan and purpose by this may spring in your mind as you read. One sound it all one need to achieve success. The principle described in this book contain the best and most practical of all is known concerning ways and means of creating useful idea. Before we go any further in our approach to description of this principle, we believe you entitled to receive this important suggestion. When riches begin to come, they come in quickly in such a great abundance that one wonders where they have hiding during all those lean years. This is an outstanding statement, and all the more so where we take into a consideration the popular belief that riches come only those who had worked hard and long. When you begin think and grow rich, you will observe the riches begin to state of mind and definiteness of purpose with a little no hard work. You and every other purpose ought to be interested in the knowing that how to acquire the state of mind which is attract riches. I spent 25 years in research analyzing more than 25,000 people because I too wanted to know how wealthy men become that way. Without that research, this book could not be written. Here, take notice of a very significant truth by which the business depression started in 1929 and continued on an all-time record of destruction until sometime after President Roosevelt entered office. Then the depression began to fade into a nothingness, just as electrician in a theater raise the light so gradually that darkness transmutes into the light before you realize it. So did the spell of a fear in the minds of a people gradually fade away, become faith. Observe very closely as soon as you master the principle of philosophy and begin to follow the instruction for applying those principles, your financial status will begin to improve. Everything you touch will bring to transmute itself into an asset for your benefit. Impossible, not at all. One of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules which will not work. He knows all the things which cannot be done. This book is written for those who seek the rule which have made others successful and are willing to state everything on those rules. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing I did with it to turn the word impossible and neatly clipped it out the book, and that would not be an unwise thing for you to do. Success come those who become success conscious. Failure come those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. The object of this book is to help all who seek it to learn the art of changing their minds from failure conscious to success conscious. Another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own inspiration and belief. Some who read this book will believe that no one can think and grow rich. They cannot think in terms of riches because their thought and habit have been steeped in poverty, want, misery, failure and defeat. These unfortunate people remind me of prominent Chinese who came to America to educate the American way. He attended the University of Chicago. One day President Hamper made this young Oriental on the campus stop to chat with him for a few minutes and asked what had impressed him as being the most noticeable characteristic of the American people. Why, China's man exclaimed, the queer slant of your eyes are off slant. What do we say about these Chinese? We refuse to believe that which do not understand. We foolishly believe that Our own limitation are proper measure of limitation. Sure, the other fellow's eyes are off slant because they are not the same as our own. Millions of people look at the achievement of Henry Ford after he had arrived and envy him because of his good fortune and luck and genuine and genius of whatever it is that credit for the Ford fortune. Perhaps one person is every 100,000 knows the secret of Ford's success, and those who do not know are too modest to too reluctant to speak it of. Because of its simplicity, a single translation will illustrate the secret perfectly. A few years back, Ford decided to produce his now famous V8 motor. He chose to build an engine with the entire 8 cylinder cast in one block and instructed his engineer to produce a design for a engine. The design was placed on a paper and the engineer agreed to man that he was simply impossible to cast a 8-cylinder gas engine block into a one piece. Ford said, "Produce it anyway," but they replied, "It is impossible." "Go ahead," Ford commanded, "and stay on job until you succeed." No matter how much time is required, the engineer went ahead. There was nothing else for them to do. If they were to remain on a Ford staff, 6 months went by, nothing happened. Another 6 months passed and still nothing happened. The engineer tried every conceivable, conceivable way to carry out the order, but things seems out of the question, impossible. At the end of year, Ford checked his engineer, and again they informed him that he found no way to carry out his order. "Go right ahead," said Ford. "I want it, and I will have it." They went ahead, and then, as it was a stroke of magic, the secret was discovered. The Ford determination had won once again. The story was not described with a minute accuracy, but the sum and substance of it is correct. Deduce from it, and you will wish the Think and Grow Rich secret of the Ford millions if you can. You will not have a look very far. Henry Ford is a success because he understands that applies the principle of success. One who desires knowing what one's want, remember this Ford story as you read and pick up out of the lines in which the secret of splendid achievement have been described. If you can do this, you can lay out your finger on a particular group of principles which made Henry Ford rich. You can equal his achievement in almost any calling for which you are suited. You are the master of your faith, the captain of your soul, because when Henley wrote the prophetic lines, "I am the master of my faith and I am the captain of my soul," he should have informed us that he was the master of our faith and the captain of our soul because we have the power to control our thoughts. We should have told us that either ether in which the little earth floats, in which we moved and have being in a form of energy moving at an inconceivable high rate of vibration, and that the ether is filled with a form of universal power which adapts itself to the nature, to the thoughts we have holds in our mind, and influences us in a natural way to transmute our thoughts into a physical equivalent. If the poet has told us the great truth, we would know why it is that we are the master of our faith and the captains of our soul. He should have told us the great emphasis that this power makes us no attempt to discriminate between destructive thought and constructive thought, that it will urge you to translate into a physical reality through the of poverty just as quick as it influences us to act upon through the of riches. He should have told us too that our brain become magnetized with the dominant thought which we hold in our mind, and by the means which no man is familiar, these magnets attract us, the forces, the people, the circumstances of life which harmonize the nature of our dominant thought. He should have told us that before we can accumulate riches in a great abundance, we must monetize our mind in an intense desire for riches. that we must become money conscious until the desire for the money drives us to create definite plans for acquiring it. But being a poet, not a philosopher, Henley contested himself by stating a great truth in a poetic form, leaving those who followed him to interpret the philosophical meaning of his life. Little by little, the truth has unfolded itself until it was now appear certain that the principle described in this book hold the secret of mastery over our economic fate. We are now ready to examine the first of this principle. Maintain the spirit of open-mindedness and remember you are ready that you are invention of no one's man. The principles were gathered from a life of experience of more than 500 men who actually accumulated riches in huge amount, were the men who began in poverty with but a little education without the influence. The principle worked for these men, but you can put them to work of your own enduring benefit. You will find it easy, no hard to do. Before you read the next chapter, I want you to know that it conveys factual information which might easily change the entire financial destiny, and it may so definitely about changes of a spontaneous proportion to people described. I want you to know all the leadership relationship between these men and myself is such that I could have taken no liberties with the fact, even I had wished to do so. One of them has been my closest personal friend and almost 25 years, and other is my son. The unusual success of these two men success have generously accredited to all the principles described in next chapter more than justify this personal reference as a meaning of emphasizing the far flung power of the principle. Almost 15 years ago, I delivered the commencement address at Selman's College, Sales, West Virginia. I emphasized the principle described in this next chapter with so much of intensity that one of the members of the graduating class definitely appropriated it and made it a part of his life own philosophy. The young man is now a member of Congress and an important factor in the present administration. Just before this book went into the publisher, he wrote me a letter in which he so clearly stated his opinion of the principle outlined in the next chapter that I will have chosen to publish his letter as an introduction to this chapter. I will give you an idea of the reward to come. My dear Napoleon, my service as a member of Congress have been given me an insight into the problem of men and women. I am writing to offer a suggestion which may become helpful to thousands of worthy people. With the apologies, I must state that suggestion it acted upon will mean several years of labor and responsibility for you, but I inherited to make the suggestion because I know you great love for the rendering useful services. In 1922, you delivered a commencement address at the Sales College when I was a member of graduating class. In the address, you planted in my mind an idea which we have been responsible for our opportunity now have to serve the people of my state and will be responsible in very large measure for whatever success I may have in the future. The suggestion I have in my mind is that you put into a book that some of substances of address you delivered at Sales College, and in that way you give the people of America an opportunity to profit by your many years of experience and association with the men who their greatness have made America the richest nation on earth. I recall as though it was yesterday the marvelous description you gave of the method by which Henry Ford, with but little schooling, without a dollar, with no influential friend, rose to the great height. I made up my mind then ever before you had finished your speech that I would make a place for myself no matter how many difficulties I have surmounted. Thousands of young men will finish their schooling this year and within the next few years. Every one of them will seeking such justice message of practical encouragement as one of I received from you. They will want to know where to turn, what to do, and get started in life. You can tell them because you have a help to solve the problem so of many people. If there any possible way that you can afford to render so great services, may I offer the suggestion that you may include every book you have benefited to a complete self-inventory indicating as indicated many years ago exactly what is standing in the way of success. Such a service as this, providing the reader of your book with a complete unbiased picture of this fault and their virtues would mean to them and difference between the success and failure. The service would be priceless. Millions of people are now facing the problem of stagnating a comeback because of the depression. I speak a personal experience. What I say, I know the earnest people would welcome the opportunity to tell you their problem and receive our suggestion for a solution. You know the problem of those who faces the necessity of beginning of all over again. Thousands of people in America told you like to know how they converted their ideas into the money. People who must start to scratch without finances and recouple their losses. If anyone can help them, you can. If you can publish this book, I would like on my first copy that comes from the press, personally autographed by you. The best wishes, believe me, accordingly your Jennings Ruddenfall. End of introduction.